The battlefield near Tigranocerta looked less like a place where men could survive, and more like a storm ready to consume everything standing before it. Dust rose into the sky from the movement of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The ground trembled beneath marching feet, horses screamed in the distance, and endless banners stretched across the horizon like waves on a violent sea. To any ordinary observer, the outcome appeared certain before the first sword was drawn. One side possessed overwhelming numbers, while the other stood hopelessly outmatched. Yet hidden beneath the armor and chaos was a truth that history would never forget. Numbers alone do not guarantee victory. The Roman soldiers standing on that field were not giants. They were not superhuman warriors blessed by destiny. They were exhausted men who had marched for miles under scorching heat, carrying heavy equipment and facing enemies who vastly outnumbered them. Many of them understood the danger better than anyone else. They could see the endless enemy formations before their eyes. They knew how easily they could be swallowed by such a force. Fear existed among them just as it exists in every human heart during moments of uncertainty. But what separated them from the larger army was not the absence of fear. It was the presence of discipline. Every Roman soldier had been trained to move as part of something greater than himself. They understood that survival depended on unity. Each shield was not only protection for one man, but protection for the soldier standing beside him. Every formation relied upon trust, precision, and order. While the opposing army depended heavily on its massive size, the Romans depended on structure. They knew that chaos destroys even the strongest force from within. A scattered army becomes weak no matter how large it may be. Discipline transformed ordinary men into a machine that could move with deadly efficiency under pressure. The larger army believed sheer size would crush resistance instantly. Confidence filled their ranks because they assumed victory was already guaranteed. Overconfidence often blinds people to their weaknesses. When individuals rely only on their advantages, they stop sharpening their focus. They stop respecting the danger in front of them. The enemy forces at Tigranocerta carried this arrogance into battle. Their massive numbers became a source of pride rather than strategy. They believed fear alone would break the Romans before combat truly began. But discipline cannot be intimidated by appearances. A trained mind stays calm while others panic. As the battle unfolded, the difference between organization and disorder became clear. Roman soldiers advanced with calculated movements while the enemy struggled to control its enormous numbers effectively. Communication within large armies often breaks under pressure. Confusion spreads quickly when thousands of men attempt to react at once. But the Romans operated like a single body with one purpose. Their formations adjusted rapidly. Their commands were followed instantly. Every soldier understood his role without hesitation. That level of discipline created strength far greater than raw numbers could provide. In life, many people misunderstand what true power looks like. They assume success belongs to those with the biggest advantages, the most resources, or the loudest presence. But history repeatedly proves otherwise. A focused and disciplined group can outperform a larger but disorganized force. One determined person with clear direction can surpass countless others drifting without purpose. Discipline creates consistency, and consistency creates results. Without discipline, talent fades, opportunities disappear, and potential remains unrealized. The Romans did not waste energy worrying about the size of the enemy because fear changed nothing. Instead, they concentrated entirely on what they could control. They trusted their training, their structure, and each other. That mindset allowed them to remain steady while panic spread through opposing ranks. Most battles are not lost because people lack strength. They are lost because people lose focus when pressure rises. Discipline keeps the mind clear when emotions threaten to take over. It forces individuals to stay committed even when circumstances become overwhelming. Modern life presents battles that may not involve swords or shields, but the principle remains the same. Many people face challenges that appear far larger than themselves. Financial struggles, failures, rejection, fear, and uncertainty can seem impossible to overcome. At first glance, these obstacles resemble an enemy army stretching endlessly across the horizon. People often feel defeated before. They even begin because they focus entirely on the size of the problem. But discipline changes the equation. Small, consistent actions repeated every day eventually become stronger than overwhelming obstacles. A disciplined person wakes up and continues moving forward even when motivation disappears. They remain focused while others become distracted. They continue building their goals while others surrender to excuses. Just as Roman soldiers trusted their formation during chaos, disciplined individuals trust their process during difficult times. They understand that victory rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It is earned through patience, repetition, sacrifice, and self-control. Those qualities may appear small at first, but over time they become powerful enough to change destinies. The Battle of Tigranocerta stands as one of history's greatest reminders that human beings should never judge outcomes based only on appearances. The Romans faced impossible odds, yet they refused to abandon order, trust, and discipline. While the larger army depended on numbers, the Romans depended on preparation and unity. In the end, disciplined minds defeated overwhelming force because strength without control eventually collapses under pressure, while disciplined determination continues advancing no matter how impossible the battle may appear. Most battles are decided long before the first weapon is raised. They begin inside the human mind, in the silent space where fear wrestles against belief. At Tigranocerta in 69 BC, the Romans faced an enemy force so enormous that many believed the battle was already lost before it even began. The enemy army covered the land like a dark tide, its numbers almost impossible to comprehend. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers stood ready for war, certain that sheer size would guarantee victory. Against them stood only around 10,000 Romans, far from home and heavily outnumbered. To ordinary men, the situation looked hopeless. But the Romans understood something powerful. Battles are not won by numbers first. They are won by mindset. Fear has defeated more armies than swords ever could. The moment a soldier believes he cannot win, his strength begins to disappear. His focus weakens, his movements slow, his courage fades. Panic spreads quickly among people who have already accepted defeat in their minds. That is why mindset becomes the foundation of every victory. The Romans standing before the massive enemy host could have surrendered to fear. They could have allowed the sight of endless enemy banners to break their spirit. Instead, they held firm because they refused to believe the battle was impossible. The Roman army had been trained not only to fight physically, but to remain mentally disciplined under extreme pressure. Their commanders understood that chaos begins in the mind before it appears on the battlefield. A frightened soldier becomes dangerous to his own side because panic destroys order. That is why Roman discipline focused heavily on mental control. Soldiers were taught to trust their training even when death seemed close. They learned to focus on their formation, their commands, and the man standing beside them rather than becoming overwhelmed by the size of the enemy. Their greatest weapon was not their sword. It was their ability to remain calm while others lost control. The opposing army entered the battle with confidence born from numbers. They believed victory was already guaranteed because of their overwhelming size. That confidence slowly transformed into carelessness. When people assume success is certain, they often stop sharpening their awareness. They underestimate opponents. They lose focus. The enemy army saw the Romans as insignificant because they judged them only by numbers. But the Romans measured strength differently. They knew determination and focus could become more powerful than fear if the mind remained steady under pressure. As combat erupted, the battlefield became a test of mental endurance. Noise filled the air from clashing steel, screaming horses, and terrified soldiers. Dust and confusion spread across the ground, turning organization into chaos for many fighters. In moments like these, human instinct pushes people toward panic and survival. Large armies often collapse because fear spreads too quickly once confusion begins. But the Roman soldiers maintained discipline because their mindset remained locked on one purpose. They did not allow fear to control their actions. They stayed focused on each movement, each command, each opportunity. Mindset determines how people react when life becomes difficult. Two individuals can face the same obstacle while producing completely different outcomes. One person sees impossibility and gives up immediately. Another sees difficulty and becomes more determined. The difference is not always intelligence, talent, or resources. Often, the difference lies entirely within belief. The Romans at Tigranocerta believed they could still win despite impossible odds. That belief gave them strength while uncertainty weakened the larger army. Human beings become capable of extraordinary actions once they stop surrendering mentally. Many people in life lose battles before they ever truly begin because they convince themselves failure is unavoidable. They see obstacles and instantly focus on limitations. They count every reason they cannot succeed. They compare themselves to stronger competitors, larger challenges, or greater disadvantages. Over time, doubt becomes stronger than action. Fear becomes stronger than ambition. But history repeatedly proves that mindset can change outcomes that once appeared certain. Determined people continue moving forward, while others stop at the first sign of resistance. The Romans understood that fear could never fully disappear. Courage does not mean feeling no fear at all. Courage means refusing to let fear make decisions for you. Every soldier on that battlefield understood the danger surrounding him. Every man knew he could die. Yet they advanced anyway because their belief in victory outweighed their fear of failure. That mental strength became contagious throughout their ranks. Confidence spread from soldier to soldier just as panic spreads through weaker forces. A united mindset created stability while confusion consumed the enemy. In modern life, battles rarely involve armies, but the same truth still controls human destiny. Students face fear of failure. Workers face uncertainty about the future. Dreamers face rejection, criticism, and doubt from others. Many people stand before challenges that feel larger than themselves, just as the Romans once stood before a massive army. The mind immediately begins creating excuses and imagining defeat. But those who learn to control their mindset gain enormous power. They stop focusing on fear and begin focusing on action. They stop measuring obstacles and start building resilience. The Battle of Tigranocerta became legendary, not because of the size of the armies alone, but because it proved how powerful the human mind can become under pressure. The Romans achieved victory because they refused to surrender internally. Their discipline, focus, and belief remained unbroken, while the larger force slowly collapsed into disorder. The battle demonstrated that victory often belongs to those who maintain clarity when others lose hope. Because once the mind refuses to surrender, even impossible odds begin to lose their power. Fear is one of the oldest forces known to mankind. It has stood beside warriors before battle, kings before judgment, and ordinary people before life-changing decisions. Fear whispers warnings into the human mind, convincing people to retreat before they even take the first step forward. At the Battle of Tigranocerta in 69 BC, fear surrounded the Roman army from every direction. The enemy force stretched endlessly across the land, enormous enough to make even experienced soldiers question whether survival was possible. The Romans understood the danger before them. They saw the overwhelming numbers. They heard the thunder of marching armies and the roar of confidence from their enemies. Yet despite all of it, they advanced forward. Courage is often misunderstood. Many people believe courage means feeling no fear at all, as though brave individuals are somehow untouched by doubt or uncertainty. But true courage has never worked that way. Courage is born in moments when fear is strongest. It is the decision to keep moving even while the heart races with uncertainty. The Roman soldiers were not fearless machines. They were human beings standing before what looked like certain death. Some were likely terrified. Some probably imagined never seeing home again. But courage pushed them to move despite those fears rather than surrendering to them. The larger enemy army believed fear itself would destroy the Romans before the battle fully began. They relied heavily on intimidation because massive numbers create psychological pressure. Seeing an enormous force can break a weaker opponent mentally before swords ever clash. Many armies throughout history collapsed simply because fear spread faster than commands could control it. Panic weakens judgment, destroys discipline, and turns organized groups into chaos. The enemy expected the Romans to break under that pressure, but the Romans had been trained to understand that fear only becomes dangerous when it controls action. Roman discipline focused heavily on maintaining order during moments of terror. Soldiers were taught to trust their training above their emotions. In battle, emotions can become deadly. Fear causes hesitation. Panic creates confusion, but training creates stability. Roman soldiers locked shields together, followed commands, and moved as one unit because structure gave them confidence under pressure. Every soldier understood that if he abandoned his position out of fear, the entire formation could collapse. Courage, therefore, became more than personal bravery. It became loyalty to the men standing beside. As the battle intensified, chaos spread rapidly across the battlefield. Dust filled the air. Horses crashed into formations. Weapons clashed violently while screams echoed across the land. In such moments, fear naturally grows stronger. Human instinct demands survival above all else. Many soldiers throughout history have turned and fled when overwhelmed by terror. But the Romans continued advancing through the confusion because courage allowed them to focus on purpose instead of panic. They understood that moving forward together offered a greater chance of survival than surrendering to fear individually. Life itself often mirrors the battlefield in ways people rarely recognize. Every person eventually faces moments where fear attempts to stop progress. Some fear failure. Others fear rejection, humiliation, uncertainty, or loss. Dreams remain unfinished because fear convinces people they are not strong enough to succeed. Many people spend years standing still, trapped not by physical chains, but by invisible fears created inside their own minds. Yet courage always begins with movement. The first step forward matters more than complete certainty. The Romans at Tigranocerta did not wait until fear disappeared before taking action. If they had waited for comfort, they would never have moved at all. Instead, they marched directly into uncertainty because courage demands action even when outcomes remain unclear. That same principle applies to every challenge in life. Success rarely comes to those who wait until conditions feel safe. Growth happens when people move beyond comfort and confront the things that intimidate them most. Fear often guards the doorway to transformation. One of the most dangerous effects of fear is that it creates the illusion of impossibility. Challenges begin to appear larger than they truly are. Obstacles seem permanent. Failure feels guaranteed before effort even begins. The enemy army at Tigranocerta appeared unbeatable because of its size. Any ordinary observer would have predicted Roman defeat, but courage changes perspective. Courage allows people to focus not on how impossible something appears, but on what must be done next. Step by step, disciplined action begins weakening obstacles that once looked overwhelming. Throughout history, the greatest achievements have come from individuals willing to move forward despite fear. Explorers crossed unknown oceans without certainty of survival. Leaders defended nations while heavily outnumbered. Inventors continued working through repeated failures. Ordinary people rebuilt their lives after devastating losses. None of them acted because they felt perfectly safe. They acted because courage became stronger than fear. Human potential expands dramatically once fear stops controlling decisions. The Romans proved this truth on the battlefield through their relentless advance against impossible odds. The Battle of Tigranocerta remains a powerful reminder that fear alone cannot defeat determined people. The Romans experienced fear like every human being does, but they refused to let it dictate their actions. Their courage came not from believing the battle would be easy, but from choosing to advance despite knowing the danger ahead. While the enemy trusted intimidation and overwhelming numbers, the Romans trusted their ability to endure fear without surrendering to it, and that willingness to keep moving forward transformed a hopeless situation into one of history's most astonishing victories. History has never been shaped by people who gave up at the first sign of difficulty. The world remembers those who endured when circumstances became unbearable, when fear surrounded them, and when failure seemed inevitable. At the Battle of Tigranocerta in 69 BC, the Roman army faced a challenge that appeared impossible to overcome. Outnumbered nearly 20 to 1, they stood before a force so massive that many believed resistance itself was meaningless. Yet, despite the terrifying odds, the Romans refused to retreat. Their victory became one of history's greatest examples of a truth that still echoes across centuries. Greatness belongs to those who endure longer than everyone else. The Roman soldiers did not possess magical strength or invincible weapons. They were ordinary men carrying exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty into battle. Many had marched for long distances under harsh conditions. Their bodies were tired and their enemy towered over them in sheer numbers. But endurance is not built upon comfort. It is forged through hardship. The Romans understood that survival and victory often depend less on immediate power and more on the ability to remain standing while others collapse. Confidence filled its ranks because victory appeared guaranteed before combat even began. Large numbers created the illusion of unstoppable power, but many massive forces throughout history have failed because they lacked resilience when pressure intensified. People who depend entirely on advantages often struggle when conditions suddenly change. The moment confusion, resistance, or unexpected difficulty appears, their confidence begins to die. Those who are mentally prepared to suffer continue moving while others lose control. As the battle unfolded, the Romans faced wave after wave of attacks. Every moment demanded focus, discipline, and persistence. Fatigue spread across the battlefield. Fear surrounded them constantly. Yet they continued holding formation because endurance allowed them to withstand pressure without breaking apart. Many battles are not won through sudden brilliance or overwhelming force. They are won by those who can continue fighting while others lose strength. The Romans understood that if they stayed disciplined long enough, the enemy's confidence would slowly transform into confusion. Human beings often underestimate the power of persistence. Modern society celebrates quick success and instant results, causing many people to lose patience the moment challenges arise. Dreams are abandoned because progress feels too slow. Goals disappear because obstacles become uncomfortable. People expect victory without struggle, yet history repeatedly proves that greatness demands endurance. The Romans at Tigranocerta did not achieve victory because the battle was easy. They achieved victory because they endured long enough for the impossible situation to begin changing in their favor. Every person faces moments in life where giving up feels easier than continuing forward. Difficulties arrive unexpectedly. Failure creates frustration. Rejection damages confidence. In those moments, many people surrender mentally before they truly reach their potential. They assume hardship means they are not meant to succeed. But endurance changes outcomes over time. The people who continue learning after failure eventually gain wisdom. Those who continue fighting through hardship eventually build strength. Persistence slowly transforms weakness into resilience. The Roman army's endurance came from more than physical strength alone. Their unity played a major role in their ability to survive impossible odds. Soldiers trusted one another completely. Every man understood that his own survival depended on the discipline of those beside him. That shared determination created stability even when chaos threatened to consume them. Endurance becomes stronger when people move together toward a common purpose. Isolation weakens resolve, but unity reinforces courage during difficult moments. One reason endurance is so powerful is because most opponents expect people to quit. Many challenges in life seem overwhelming at first because they are designed to test patience and resilience. Fear attempts to wear people down over time. Obstacles continue pressing harder and harder, waiting for surrender. But those who refuse to stop often discover that many barriers are not as permanent as they once appeared. The Romans faced an enemy that looked unbeatable. Yet the longer the battle continued, the more cracks began appearing within the larger force. Confidence weakened. Confusion spread. Momentum shifted toward those who refused to give up. Greatness rarely reveals itself in moments of comfort. It emerges during suffering, exhaustion, uncertainty, and pressure. Anyone can feel confident when conditions are easy. True character appears when circumstances become painful. The Romans at Tigranocerta demonstrated extraordinary endurance because they remained focused while surrounded by danger from every side. They continued advancing despite fear, despite exhaustion, and despite impossible odds. Their resilience became stronger than the enemy's numbers. The Battle of Tigranocerta remains a timeless reminder that endurance can overcome obstacles far greater than raw strength alone. The Romans proved that determined people become incredibly dangerous once they decide not to quit. While the enemy relied on size and intimidation, the Romans relied on persistence, discipline, and the refusal to surrender under pressure. Because those who endure through the darkest moments often become the ones who achieve victories the world once believed were impossible.